a Please stand and join me in chanting of the three refuges. We first take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha in Sino-Korean out of respect to our lineage, and then we will do an English translation. So for this first part, the Sino-Korean, throw your voice in as best you can, even though you may not know the words. Shim Quimyam Shivam Samse Chemam Chale Sanju Ilche Puntaya Ajun Shim Quimyane Shivam Samse Chemam Chale Sanju Ilche Dhammaya Chim Quimyane Shivam Samse Chemam Chale Sanju Ilche And now repeat after me in English. I go for refuge to the Buddha.
I go for refuge to the Buddha,
and resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will cultivate a heart of enlightenment.
I will cultivate a heart of enlightenment.
And realize the great way.
And realize the great way.
I go for refuge to the Dharma.
I go for refuge to the Dharma,
and resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will penetrate the teachings.
I will penetrate the teachings.
And uncover oceans of wisdom.
And uncover oceans of wisdom.
I go for refuge to the Dharma.
I go for refuge to the Dharma,
and resolve with all beings
and resolve with all beings.
I will seek peace and happiness for the many,
I will seek peace and happiness for the many,
and transform this world into Buddha lands unimpeded.
and transform this world into Buddha lands unimpeded.
Please return now to your places for another shorter period of meditation, followed by a Dharma talk. Please join me in some stretching as an end to our meditation practice. Helping ourselves wake up, working with our bodies. Finding those pressure points along the ridge of our skull. All the way back to our neck. And massaging our ears. Breathing in, we lean forward to stretch our lower spine. Just slowly enjoying the stretches. Uniting body, breath, and mind. Spinal twist to the left. Looking over your left shoulder. Eyes as far around as you can bring them. And then slowly shifting to a right spinal twist. Now placing the hands at the edge of your hip bones. Nice big circles. Reverse. Placing your right hand over your left rib cage. Lean to the right. And then the opposite direction. Grasping the hands behind the head. We do some sharp outward breaths. Twisting to the left, to the right. Reaching all the way up to the sky. Nice big breath. So good morning, Dharma brothers and sisters and friends. I'm feeling spring, the scent of spring coming through the windows and hearing a few birds out there. So this is welcome news on welcome news at the end of a long winter. So I see we have a yellow light on the battery. We will change it. Hopefully it will last us through this service. Let me pin this in. All right, can everybody hear me? Great. So I'm not quite sure how this Dharma talk is going to go today. I'll be trying to tie together a number of things. But let me just start with the statement that life is messy. And as you can see, this is a pretty broad statement. So this week, our week started with a snowstorm. And of course, we were all out shoveling snow, piling it up. And then it all melted and water started coming in the back door of the temple. So we had to quickly go and get sandbags to prevent the flood from coming into the back door of the yellow building, the temple next door. When the driveway was shoveled out, someone came in a truck to do it for our neighbors. And the snow was piled in front of the window wells, which creates a problem for this building. Because when that snow melts, what happens? It goes into the basement. And so here we are shoveling out the snow from the driveway, putting it in a new place. And then continuing the theme of water everywhere, the sump pump failed in our new building, the Sangha house. And there was water all over the floor. And so we were there because we have drains in the basement. We were trying to direct the water down the drains out of the building. We did get an emergency plumber to come and fix the problem. However, it was some pretty quick emergency action on our part. So this is part one of Life is Messy. And then I noticed vexations, everyday vexations continue. Things like I was on hold on the phone for 2 hours, trying to get through to the airline so I could bring a pet onto the airplane. And when I was at an hour and 45 minutes, someone came to the door and I had to hang up and then start the process over. So these everyday aggravations, I'm sure that you have your own version of this. Everybody does. While all of this mundane stuff is going on, we have the invasion of Ukraine. And our hearts go out to those whose very lives are threatened. And things happening at a much bigger global scale. And if you extend this to the messiness of the planet, all that flooding that we had, we're in the midst of climate change and it's only going to get worse. So what do we do with all of this? That's the question. We are asked, we are told to look for applying to Buddhist teachings to everyday life. And the messiness is certainly one way of learning to apply those teachings. What came to mind for me as I was thinking about teachings was one of our Korean Zen masters. Let me get the dates of his life. Kyung-ho, 1849 to 1912. And the reason I thought of this particular Zen master is he offered us this teaching that basically says, be equal to every hindrance. Buddha attained supreme enlightenment without hindrance. So the hindrance went away. Once he was enlightened, he felt no hindrance. Seekers after truth are schooled in adversity. When they are confronted by a hindrance, they can't be overcome. Then cutting free their treasure is great. So just a little bit more about Kyung-ho, and then we'll look at one of his particular teachings. So this was a monk with a very charismatic personality. And he lived at a time when Korean Buddhism was just emerging from some of its doldrums. If you look at the history of Korea, and Buddhism in Korea, maybe every religion goes through these ups and downs, but Buddhism in Korea went through this long period of repression in which Confucianism dominated. Monks and nuns were pushed out of the cities into the mountain monasteries, scrapping away for a living, but they survived. And then there was a Japanese invasion shortly after that, and the Japanese brought their own version of Buddhism to Korea, pushing out, the original kind of form. So they left, and Buddhism was just starting to revive, although I think everybody must have been exhausted because there was not very much attention given to it for a few years. It's kind of in the doldrums. But along that time came just the monk that was needed, Kyung-ho, because he was a very charismatic, dynamic personality that really knew how to engage people and I think excite them about Buddhism and engaging in Buddhism. So he was almost a folk hero. He was born in 1849, and his father died when he was 9. His mother could not support him and herself, so she went to live at a monastery and had some sort of position there, probably as a temple attendant. So Kyung-ho grew up in a monastery. He was initiated as a monk at a fairly young age, and it was quickly discovered that he's a very gifted scholar. So he studied all these broad paradigms, theories that were out there at that time. So Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism. He's a very great scholar. And at age 23, that's pretty young, he was appointed as head lecturer in Buddhist studies at Tonghaksha, one of the monasteries, and he drew these large crowds. So for the next 7 years, he functioned as this lecturer, inspired people with his Dharma talks, attracted lots of students. But then at age 30, he had an awakening while he was traveling to see his old teacher. So I want to read about this. In 1879, when he was 30 years old, Kyung-ho decided to visit his old teacher, Keho, whom he had not seen in a long time and for whom he he retained a great deal of affection. So he started walking on his journey to Seoul. On his way, he passed a small village. There were no people in the streets. Immediately, he knew something was wrong, and he began to feel an overwhelming sense of disaster. He knocked on the door of a house and, finding no answer, opened the door. There were 5 corpses on the floor in various stages of decomposition. He opened the door of the next house, and there were more corpses rotting on the floor. As he walked through the main street, dazed and terrified, he noticed a sign, "Danger, cholera. If you value your life, go away." The sign struck Kyung-hyo like a hammer. He recognized his own fear and thought, "I'm supposed to be a great sutra master. I already understand all of the Buddhist teachings. Why am I so afraid? Even though I understand that all things are transient, that life and death are aspects of one reality, I'm very attached to my body. So life is a hindrance, and death is a hindrance. What can I do?" Rather than continue on his way to Seoul, he turned back and returned to his temple. He summoned all his students and said, "You have all come here to study the sutras, and I've been teaching you. But I know now that the sutras are only the Buddha's words. They are not the Buddha's mind. As many sutras as I have mastered, I still haven't attained true understanding. I can't teach you anymore. If you wish to continue your studies, there are many qualified sutra masters who will be glad to teach you. But I've decided to understand my true self, and I will not teach again until I attain enlightenment." So this then started a journey for Kyung-hyo, and he went on a period of meditation, personal meditation, for extended period of time. And he connected with everyday life and everyday people. There are many, many stories about Kyung-hyo during this next period of his life. And we can spend probably lots of Dharma talks talking about these stories. One of them has to do with a cow with no nostrils. So as he was sitting in silent meditation, one of his students went out into the streets and was speaking to the lay folks. And one of those people said to him, "Your master sits in meditation away from everybody. He's like a cow with no nostrils." And this student reported back to Kyung-hyo. And when Kyung-hyo heard this phrase, it was a great awakening for him. Because what is a cow with no nostrils? That cow cannot be led around by anybody. That cow is truly free. So he used that to attain awakening. And then there's other stories about Kyung-hyo that are very interesting. The one that I want to focus on for this morning is some sage advice that he gave to many of his students later on in his teachings. And I think I'm drawn to this because it speaks to why our practice is uncomfortable and why it's important to us to use that discomfort to help us wake up and to function in a better way. So this is well known throughout Korean Buddhism, and actually our founder and Zen master, Samui Sunim, translated this or came up with a version of this in our liturgy book, Moon Journeying Through Clouds. And this is something we read on special occasions, like the Parinirvana service and New Year's and Enlightenment Day, all these kinds of things. So it's called 10 Guides Along the Path. And I'm going to read this to you. It's a little bit long. It's a lot of information. So I'm just asking you to listen for maybe one or two things that strikes you. And then I'll talk about maybe one or two things. And you can study this later at your leisure. So here we go. 10 guides along the path. 1, don't hope for perfect health. Perfect health leads only to greater greed. Treat illness as medicine, not disease. So spoke the Enlightened One. 2, don't long for a life free from hardship. Such a life leads only to haughtiness and self-pampering. Make worries and hardships a way of life. So spoke the Enlightened One. 3, don't hope for a lack of impediments in your study. Release is hiding right behind obstructions. So spoke the Enlightened One. 4, don't hope for a lack of temptations in your training. A lack of temptations will only serve to soften your resolve. Treat temptations as friends who are helping you along the path. So spoke the Enlightened One. 5, don't hope for easy success. Easy accomplishment leads only to increased rashness. Accomplish through difficulties. So spoke the Enlightened One. 6, don't hope to get your own way with friends. Having friends give in to your wishes only leads to arrogance. Make long-term friends through compromise in your relationships. So spoke the Enlightened One. 7, don't expect people to follow your wishes or commands. This too leads to arrogance. Consider those who differ with you to be your character builders. So spoke the Enlightened One. 8, don't expect rewards for your kindness. This leads only to a scheming mind. Throw out expectation of rewards like you had thrown out old shoes. So spoke the Enlightened One. 9, don't expect more out of life than you deserve. Exaggerated profit-seeking leads only to foolishness. Become rich at heart in small amounts. 10, don't complain about vexations. This leads only to resentment and poison in the heart. Consider vexations as the first door on the path. So spoke the Enlightened One. this morning I'm just going to choose one of these to comment on. And if you don't have a copy of this, we maybe can publish in our e-bulletin these 10 guides for your reflection. But the one I want to comment on is don't expect people to follow your wishes or commands. This too leads to arrogance. So as we were working with that flood, all of the residents pitching in, I'm sort of used to people looking to me for direction, and I have my own ideas about how to deal with this flood. And I found, like for me, this was like a letting go practice. I had to let go of those ideas and just go with the flow of what was happening. And it was interesting to see how our whole group of residents came together into this plan of pushing things down the drain. That's not something I would have thought of at all. I would have maybe first gone for, let's get things off the floor and something like that. But as we worked together, there was something very bonding about that, but also something very creative. So this says to me, as I wade into messiness, I need to do some letting go. I'm the kind of person who likes to have control. Like I like my schedules and all of that kind of thing. But if I just let go of that, interesting things kind of happen. So that's my little example of how to work with mundane, everyday messiness. And now I want to spend a little time talking about things that are happening on a broader scale, because the situation in Ukraine is, I think, concerning to many of us. And this week, in my email, and those of you who are connected with Plum Village, maybe you received this email too. It was a reflection from Thich Nhat Hanh as he was dealing with the Vietnam War. And so I thought this is an interesting Buddhist teaching for us to look at messiness on a broader kind of scale. So I just want to read it to you. My dear friend, I would like to tell you how I practiced when I got angry during the war in Vietnam. There was a lot of injustice, and many thousands of friends of mine were killed. I got very angry, but at that time, I was already a solid practitioner. I did not say anything. I did not act because I knew that acting or saying things while you are angry is not wise and may create a lot of destruction. I went back to myself, recognizing my anger, embracing it, and looked deeply into the nature of my suffering. I was able to understand the nature of suffering in Vietnam. I saw that not only did the Vietnamese suffer, but Americans suffered as well during the war in Vietnam. The American young men who were sent to Vietnam to kill and to be killed underwent a lot of suffering, and the suffering continues even today. I was able to see the real enemy of humans as ignorance, discrimination, fear, craving, and violence. So I went to America to call for the US government to look deeply and revise that policy. I remember I met with the Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, and I told him the truth about suffering. He kept me with him for a long time and listened deeply to me, and I was very grateful for the quality of his listening. 3 months later, when the war was intensified, I heard that he had resigned from his post. Hatred and anger were not in my heart. That is why I was listened to by many young people in my country, advocating them to follow the path of reconciliation. And together, we helped bring about the negotiations for peace in Paris. I hope my friends here in New York are able to practice the same. There are ways that we can go back to ourselves and practice so that we rediscover our calmness, our tranquility, our lucidity. Ways in which we can look deeply to understand the real causes of the suffering. That understanding will help us do what needs to be done and not do what could be harmful to us and other people. So a few weeks ago, in celebration of the Lunar New Year, we engaged in some chanting for world peace. And I would like to sort of renew that chanting for us for a few moments. And then after that, I'll invite you, your any comments or discussions or offerings that you wish to make. So it goes like this. Please join in once you pick it up. Wahom Song Chong, 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 Wahom Song Chong. So in our remaining 5 minutes together, I invite any comments that people wish to make.
I'd like to comment on the last thing along the path that she talked about, vexation. Seems a little harmless, except that I do believe I have an understanding that the first noble truth, the fact of suffering, the word suffering can also be translated as irritation or annoyance, things a little less loaded than the word suffering might be. And I think that's why it's called perhaps the first door on the path. It is the first noble truth that there is suffering, there is vexation. And so I'm quite aware of that these days, of smaller things. And one that I notice that is a practice of mine, you know, if you're moving along and something gets kind of stuck and it's, what? But that's kind of annoying. And it has come to me that that's nature itself. Nature exists because things get stuck someplace and then a seed can land or whatever. And so I now think that when something that gets stuck and is annoying to me, someday I might just be hanging on by one little bit of something, a snag or whatever will save me. And so I really understand that it's a part of, it's natural, it's a nature way, it's a life-giving thing sometimes to be a snag or being caught by something.
Thanks. I had a couple of comments that were related. One that really took me by surprise is the Thich Nhat Hanh email you mentioned. So I've been kind of working on my own fear reactions or worries, because I know that I tend to worry quite a bit. And I was listening to what Thich Nhat Hanh said about the true enemy of people are things like hatred, ignorance, discrimination, fear. And I thought, oh, maybe I'm just looking at this all wrong. Maybe I can just say, all right, I'm done with this fear. I don't know. It doesn't seem to be exactly like a truism, because like also what you were saying in liturgy is that you can make worries and hardship a way of life. And so I don't know. Maybe it's like good advice for different people. But I thought that was really powerful. I'm hoping to really work with the statement that Thich Nhat Hanh made.
I think we have comments in the chat too, so.
I was just wondering, with the chant for peace, I'm guessing that was in Sino-Korean. What will be the rough English translation of that phrase?
It is this deep wish that the precepts will be practiced everywhere, and that will create a pure land.
Thank you.
Wa Om Som Jong. Yeah. Thank you.
And the precepts being moral principles underlying it.
I guess my comment also is I've definitely been more aware of the Ukraine and Russian conflict. I'm not much into like world history, so I'm often pretty ignorant when it comes to like the news. And I know that in Buddhism, at least I've heard from a few Zen master about the idea of not listening too much to the news and being kind of afraid of that because there's always going to be suffering. So it doesn't really matter like what form it's in. Like, the kind of basis is that, there is suffering. But then I also know of more of Thich Nhat Hanh's principle on like engaged Buddhism. And there's that idea of you should be knowledgeable of like what's going on around you and kind of reflect on being able to like have that knowledge to reflect on that. And yeah, it's something that I definitely want to explore a bit more about the idea of like whether it's better to just understand the kind of the simple concept that there is suffering and not paying too much attention to the news and what is that suffering versus the idea of wanting to understand more about like just worldly conflict.
So perhaps you could read a few things in the chat.
So there were no specific questions in the chat, but some comments. Thank you for a wonderful teaching today from Sabong. And Ma'um, your Dharma talk today was spot on and timely, just what I needed to hear, from Juliana in Seattle.
Wow. Okay. Any others? Well, then let's close. So we'll close with the 4 great vows and then have some announcements. So please repeat after me. All beings, one body.
All beings, one body.
I vow to liberate.
I vow to liberate.
Blind passions, one root.
Blind passions, one root.
I vow to terminate.
I vow to terminate.
Dharma gates, one mind.
Dharma gates, one mind.
I vow to penetrate.
I vow to penetrate.
The great way of Buddha.
The great way of Buddha.
I vow to realize.
I vow to realize.
That's it.
How's that?
That works.
Okay, public speaking. If you're 101. Yeah, it's another nice Sunday. I'm very happy to be here. And Hachu, I saw one of the snowdrops yesterday right by the Sangha Hall. Yeah, and so it's nice and sunny. And I have a yellow piece of paper here that has some notifications that I wanted to share with you. It's for the temple. We've got upcoming events. The one that I noticed first is the 5-week sessions of meditation coming up, starting on March 24th. So in about 3 weeks. And Ma'um, is that online only?
Everything now is in person. We are so happy to be
Yeah.
back together.
Yeah. Sounds like our 70% of the country is getting to the point where we don't need masks too. So
Pretty soon, yeah.
yeah, I'd go for that. And then we have actually the next day and overnight that day, the 25th and 26th, we have an overnight meditation course, which is kind of like a mini retreat. Those are always really interesting too. I hope to make one of those. And we've got yoga classes, which I'm going to also. They're Tuesday evenings, 6:30 to 8 with David Black. He's a great teacher. And then we've got some study groups too, which I hadn't mentioned in a while. But they're during the week. They're both Zoom meetings, so you can get the link if you sign up out here on the charts. We have Wednesday evenings member sittings, which are study groups also where we talk about the Song of Meditations And Thursday mornings, 9:30 to 10, we have a Way of the Bodhisattva discussion group. And the Wednesday one is also just like the yoga, 6:30 to 8 o'clock on Wednesdays. And then I believe Jagwa, we are having precepts preparations already.
Mhm.
And they got started recently.
We've had 2 meetings so far.
Okay.
Mhm.
Good. So people can still join in, right? If they haven't.
Yeah, they should. If there's anyone who's interested in joining late, please just talk to me after the service and I can provide some more information.
Okay. Good. Thanks. And today we've got Dharma Recovery Dharma.
Recovery Dharma, and also with the same link as the one that you're doing Zoom, Thursday evening, 7 p.m.
Oh,
is we're also doing another one.
okay. Maybe we can get that in the announcements.
That would be nice.
Okay. Well, good. So I know there's a few new people here. Good to meet you. Glad you came. And glad to see everyone else come too. And yeah, so I think at this point, unless anyone has any announcements or questions, so here's something from Haju.
We're having a group of students join us in March for a retreat, and they'll be staying overnight for 2 or 3 days. And I've been thinking about how we can do that in a good way for everyone. And I'm wondering if you have a screen at home, a folding screen that we could use or borrow for 3 or 4 days, just to help us with some of the spaces that we'll be preparing for this student group. It's from Davidson College in North Carolina. So if you could just let Jagwa or Maum or Tongsan know, Hayun, I'm going to slip away to the preparation for death group that we're having right now.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And then I'll pass this on back to Maum.
Okay, so we will conclude with a 3 formal vows. So if you could please stand and join me.